Hello, I'm Marcy Tyler, the Director of Building Science for Nudura. I am sitting today in the library at the Cumberland Trace Elementary School in Bowling Green, Kentucky. This elementary school is one of the very first net zero schools. I'm so excited to be able to sit here today with all of the people that were able to make this a reality. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
So thanks for joining me today. I thought it'd be great if we could just start off with just, letting us know who you are and your title as well as where you work.
I'm Kenny Stanfield. I'm a principal architect with Sherman Carter Barnhart Architects.
Good morning. I'm Gary Chaffin. I'm in my 14th year as Warren County School Board member and currently the Vice Chair for Warren County School Board.
My name is Mike Wilson. I'm Director of Facilities and Energy Management for Warren County Public Schools, and also prior to that I spent 12 years on the school board of Warren County Board of Education.
Good morning. My name is Tim Geegan. I'm with Alliance Corporation. We were the builder on this project.
Good morning. I'm Martin Clark with Nudura Corporation, and I was very fortunate to be involved with the first ICF school here in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Hello, I'm Chad Riggs. I work at CMTA. I'm a mechanical engineer, project manager, and work exclusively in the Energy Solutions division of our company.
Good morning. I'm Brian Baumgartel. I'm with CMTA Engineers, and I'm a principal electrical engineer with the firm.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Cash. I'm the project manager at Sherman Carter Barnhart Architects, and I oversaw the construction of this project.
Great. Look at all these great minds here involved in such a wonderful school construction, and not just this school, right? Why don't we kick it off today and just talk a little bit about net zero. People say net zero, zero energy. Who wants to kind of tell me a little bit about what that means?
So the kind of the nomenclature has changed a little bit. It started out being net zero, and now we say zero energy. But there's really three kind of designations. And basically, when you say a zero energy building or a zero energy school, in this case, we're talking about a facility that has the potential to generate as much energy as it consumes. There's two other kind of levels. There's zero energy achievable, and basically what that means is we've done everything we can to reduce energy dramatically so that adding the solar or an alternative energy source really is a small expenditure instead of a great large one. So the energy reduction is key to that. And in this case, these buildings, we're talking about a 75% energy reduction from the normal school. And then there's zero energy emerging. And what that means is we've done everything we can. We've got the dramatic energy reduction through, various strategies, and I'm sure you're going to ask about those. But there's also a phase one of the alternative energy. In the case of Cumberland Trace, it's a 50 kW solar array on the roof. So we're generating some energy, but we haven't got quite to zero yet. But we have the potential to add another phase and get there.
That's the ready part of it. Okay.
That's right. And then the final is the zero energy, and that's where you're generating as much or even a little more than you're consuming.
Okay. Thanks for that explanation. So when we think about, not only just, Cumberland Trace, but other schools in the area, why don't you guys let me know what made you go this route? What initiated why you wanted to start going this route?
Of course, in education, when we're building a new building, safety is our number one priority. So we want to make sure that when we're building a building, safety is one of the main factors. The second thing is, as far as, when we're building a building, we need it to be as energy efficient as possible. Of course, we suffer, budget cuts regularly, unfunded mandates. So we have to look for ways to cut our cost, and one of the ways that we looked at in Warren County is let's be more energy efficient. Every dollar we save in energy usage is a dollar we put back into education. So, especially on the ICF, they're extremely safe. They're extremely energy efficient. They help us, with their R value and what we do as far as looking at being able to save that energy. So overall, it's just mainly, for us, it was, how can we save money and spend less, And like I said, the number one there is that gives us more money to go back into education.
So when the board initially considered ICF construction, it was probably 16, 17 years ago, and the idea was brought to us by Kenny with Sherman Carter Barnhart and with Martin with Nudura, and the idea was brought to us as an alternative to the traditional construction methods. And just as Mr. Chaffin mentioned, it was the safety factor was first and foremost, but additionally was the potential energy savings that goes hand in hand with some of the other ideas that we have with energy consumption. And then the speed of construction was another factor. In Warren County, we're a growth district, meaning we grow basically year over year more students in our buildings. So we're always building new schools or adding additions to our schools. And you have the time to build a school is typically, you want to try to do it over the summer months, but that's impossible to build a brand new school in 3 months. So anything we can do to shorten the time frame to get a school, under roof and get kids in it is what we want to do. So the ICF construction really helped in all three of those facets.
Perfect. So everyone else, so they had a reason. Energy was their route, energy savings. Tim, what got you involved? Why were you interested in being a part of building with ICF or net zero?
Alliance Corporation was hired as a construction manager on projects, several of those projects. And initially, it was trying to get a new system in the mainstream of construction, which was a little difficult initially. But after a couple projects, several contractors really embraced the process, and ultimately it led to speed of construction as well as helping out in some of the more labor-intensive scopes where, a large masonry crew is kind of rare right now. So this obviously let us kind of divide up that, instead of having all the exterior masonry walls, now using the ICF, that kind of cuts the masonry almost in half on a project. So now you can have an ICF crew as well as a masonry crew kind of working simultaneous. So that helps speed of construction. And, we worked through several different processes as far as doors and windows and stuff. And right now it's kind of down to a science. I think we did some experimenting. We tried some different things, but through several projects, and I'm not saying we as Alliance, but the group and the process just got perfected. So it's relatively easy now, and it's the norm. It's not the exception. So I think that's really what led to multiple projects. And, again, if you're not able to get bogged down into, the labor, you're speeding up, so you're actually saving money and saving the owner money also.
Well, and I know you specifically have a personal experience as well, right? You're also building and have built your own home with it as well. So it's interesting when you come home and you actually use what you're using on your day job, right?
Well, after the first couple projects, that was always a goal of mine, is that I like the process enough where eventually I'll have a home out of ICF, and that dream has come true. So.
What about Chad and Brian? Anything you guys want to add in terms of your first steps into net zero or building with ICF?
Yeah, I think, if you go back, before Zero Energy, or really we're a very data-driven company. So we were seeing how we were able to, reduce energy with things like geothermal and ICF, but I think Plano was one of the first projects where we really got in and dug into the data, and we did some extensive metering. The utility company came out and changed the meter because they were trying to figure out what was going on with it, because it wasn't working, and they're like, "Wow, what are you doing here?" So, out of that, we, it's like, okay, let's all gather up and let's figure out how we can get to zero energy. And, where's the energy going? Is it going to lighting? Is it going to the HVAC, kitchen, computers, outlets? And we looked at each piece of that pie, and out of that, we were able to look at whether it was the HVAC and how we could make that better. And really, like Kenny said, the first thing is to get all the energy out of it. And but we have to also make it cost effective. So one of the, by having a good building envelope with ICF, we're actually able to reduce the HVAC, the amount of equipment we need. So we're able to save money by not having to put so much HVAC equipment into the building. So ICF, it's everything. It's the envelope, it's the HVAC system, it's the lighting, it's the kitchen. How do we do things different in the kitchen?
Well, and I think Kenny and Jennifer, your side of the story, but I think Kenny, I'd like to hear why you got started with it, and then also, it's more than just the buzzword. I keep saying net zero. It's not just about zero energy. It's about everything that goes into it. As Brian was alluding to as well.
Yeah, exactly. Brian said it well when he started talking about it's these multiple things. So basically, we had to change the way we designed buildings, and really just ask ourselves every design decision we were making, how does this affect energy consumption? And having the data to kind of see where the energy was going in a building was great, but then also recognizing that with any kind of building system, whether it's ICF or whatever, you want to maximize the qualities, the good qualities of that product or that system. And so it's not just taking a school that we would normally design and just make it out of ICF. It's saying how do you design differently to maximize the insulating value or the thermal mass? And so what we started doing is looking at how do we make the building more compact. Now, we're not cutting square footage, because we still have to have the same number of classrooms and the gym has to be that big. But what we started looking at is when we started putting these pieces together, there is ways you can design the building to have less contact with the environment. And whether that's the perimeter wall or the roof, the idea is to make that as compact as possible. And so energy savings is part of that, but also the cost of construction is part of that too, because if now I have 1,500 linear feet of wall instead of 3,000, well, that costs less to build, both in labor and material. And so it becomes kind of this snowball effect as you start looking at all the systems in the building and how do you maximize that. And then as the architect, how do you wrap your head around all of those things and design a building that has the momentum to save energy instead of use energy. And so if you're keeping that at the front of everything that you're doing, decision making wise, then you can start to see the results of that. Because the idea of cutting a building's energy consumption by 75%, that's pretty dramatic, but that's what it was going to take. Because when we did the very first zero energy school, now today solar energy, not only is it a lot cheaper, but it's more efficient. But just to give you an idea, on the very first building we were looking at, if we had not cut energy consumption, we would have been looking at a solar array that would have taken the equivalent of 3 football fields and an enormous amount of money as well. So when we looked at energy reduction, so zero energy is just a subtraction problem first, because we don't want the largest solar array, we want the smallest to balance out the energy costs. So we were able to do the first one with the roof covered in solar, and then we had one parking area. We had a parking structure that had solar panels on it. So we were able to do that on the site we had very compactly. Now in this school, it's more efficient because we've kept the numbers going down. And so we can actually contain the entire solar array on the roof of this building. We don't need any parking structures at all. And we certainly don't need football fields.
That's good, right? I've spoken to other people in the industry, and they get upset when somebody starts with that, with the photovoltaic. They're like, oh, let's start there. And they're like, no, we can't start with that, or we'll have 3 football fields, right? So it's about all the other different aspects of that building, and the cooperation that I'm seeing even here is what's necessary as well.
It is, and then in Kentucky, as in other states, everybody has a budget, and so our goal here with Warren County, with the first school and everyone that's come after it, is we want it to be net zero, but it can't cost more than a conventional school, because we're a growing district, as Mike said, and Gary, and you have to take that into account, because you can't spend a whole bunch of money here when you've got need down the line that you've got to keep building schools. And so we had to find a way to achieve net zero, but do it in a way that was cost effective, so that this just became the norm here.
One of the things I was going to mention that I also really like about ICF is the fact that throughout renovation projects and stuff, if you consider ICF, it really lends itself well to those scenarios of where you could put electrical conduits within it, and you can come back and change the orientation of those spaces very easily without having to mess with the structure of the exterior wall. And that's something that you can't find with block or studs very easily without having to mess with that substructure. And we have a lot of districts that, not just Warren County, that are considering that for additions onto schools because of that scenario.
I was going to ask that, new construction, or is it also additions and things like that? So yeah.
We're seeing more and more with additions and renovations as well.
So I'm just thinking, for the people that listen to this and hear this, are thinking, well, that's great, you saved all this energy, but what about the conditions in the building? And Mr. Chaffin and I, we served together as board members. We weren't just board members, we're also parents and grandparents. And so these schools are very comfortable for our students and our staff, because our students are in here 8 hours a day, every day or more. It's cool in the summer, it's warm in the winter. It's not drafty. It's the climate's it's controlled. It's very nice learning environment, and also a teaching environment, because our teachers are here sometimes long before the students arrive and long after they arrive. I now have a daughter that's a 3rd grade teacher, and so we're not doing all these energy savings on the back of our students or on the back of our staff. It's doing it, we're managing to do all this and still make it a great learning environment for our students.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, as an elected official, we had to be good stewards with taxpayers' money. I mean, and, looking at the construction, yeah, this is fantastic, but what's the cost to it? So we looked at it, and like I said, there's places we're saving, but at the bottom line, we're in the education business, like Mike said, and we have to have an environment conducive to learning. And if they're cold in the winter and hot and the sun's out, you're not doing a lot of learning. So these have to be comfortable buildings, as you said as well, Mike. And with the fact that we are able to build these new buildings cost effective, and the bonus is we're building them energy efficient. So once we had those things in place, now, with the money that we're able to save, we have several buildings without solar, but we have the capabilities of even more adding to that. But, like you said, the ones that we have been able to use the solar as well, we definitely are in a good situation as far as our costs there. But, the ones that don't have solar are still tremendously energy efficient. We just recently, with some to our older buildings, we've done some modifications and been able to do some things, and now we're the #1 most energy efficient school district in the state of Kentucky. Well, that's great, fantastic, but what that means, bottom line, is we're being good stewards with our taxpayer dollars, and we're able to put more money into education and not just into the energy company's pocket.
One other added benefit that we've been seeing is, as of, I guess it was 2018, Kentucky Building Code adopted the requirement for tornado shelters to be included within school design. And so our newest school for Warren County, Rich Pond Elementary, includes a storm shelter within that design. And ICF lends itself perfectly to that scenario. And so, that was a no-brainer to go on and use that in that instance, and then just make sure that the roof structure is accommodated for the uplift and everything. So that was good.
That's great. So when I think of storm shelters, I think of small maybe, but Ray, you're talking accommodating. Yeah, it's a gym. So that's a great addition.
Yeah, and I think Gary or Mike spoke a little bit about unfunded mandates, and this requirement is an unfunded mandate. And so, to fortify a building to become a FEMA approved to withstand a direct tornado strike, if you weren't using ICF, you'd spend a lot of money trying to make another system comply. But what we found out is the ICF, and we've been using it for years, can withstand the tornado strike without doing anything special to it. Right. So as Jennifer said, we modify the roof a little bit to take care of that, but by its very nature, it was a natural for a storm shelter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why at Rich Pond Elementary, which is our newest one, it didn't add any cost to the building because we already had that baked into the design, if you will.
Wow, that's great. So we're at Cumberland Trace today. This isn't the first. Which one was the first?
Alberton Elementary was the first ICF building, not only that we were involved with, but it was the first ICF school in Kentucky. And that was back in 2005, I think.
15 years ago.
Wow.
Right.
So, okay, that's another good point. This isn't something you recently started working with. This has been 15 years and counting.
It's been 15 years and counting, and I think with very few exceptions, every new school that came after Alberton, well, one exception really, and they've all been ICF, and then they've all since Richardsville, and again, that's the first net zero or zero energy school in the nation here in Warren County. Since that, every school that we've done in Warren County was designated to achieve zero energy. And so that just became a standard for the district, and it's now how we design every building, no matter where it is. We design it to achieve zero energy. Yeah.
You know, what's interesting about this whole story here is how basically Warren County School had started by using ICF. It was basically, talking with the facility. I actually brought a form in, talking to the facility director, and showed them here on the ICF. They said, well, we want to see a school built out of this. Well, I thought, now what am I going to do? Because I didn't know there was a school even built out of ICF. So I just kind of sent out a little quick email to some of the people within their reps at Holdfast Technologies. Well, lo and behold, we got an email from a contractor in Alaska, and it said, we actually built an ICF school in Bentonville, Arkansas. So they give me all the contacts. So I contacted the school district, and they said that, yeah, if you'd like to come see the school, and this was a private parochial school here. So we loaded up here from Warren County. I think Kenny went with us, and the facility directors went with us, and I'm not sure if someone from Alliance didn't go with us to go see this school. Well, this school was, like I say, it was a private school. It was about 40,000 square feet, and it was built there in Bentonville, Arkansas. So the superintendent took us a tour of the school, and then he got talking about this school. This school was literally built by the students. The students actually stacked the ICF on the school, and then they had people come in to actually pour this. And as we were walking around, the school superintendent said, do you hear any noise in the hallway? And no, I mean, it was just as quiet as it could be. And, he was talking about the ICF walls are not only for the exterior, but it was for the interior corridor walls. So it was a very quiet school. And then after we did the complete tour, they asked, do you mind showing us what your utility bills is? Well, so he asked the secretary, said, yeah, can you bring out our utility bills? And did. Well, this school, their total utilities was only $7,000 for the whole year, and this was a 40,000 square foot school. Now, it wasn't exactly designed like this, but that's where it all started. I mean, that's when Warren County said, all right, this is what we want to do. I don't think any of us really wanted to do ICF at the very beginning, except for me, because I was selling it. But it was, from there, that's where this all started. And Warren County and SCB and CMTA, they have taken it to a whole new level.
And that's where it really hit home for me, is when you're looking at this building, roughly 40,000 square feet, and I'm looking at an energy bill and going, I spend more than that on my house, and I don't live in a 40,000 square foot house. So that really became, this is something we need to do, and we need to, implement this as a fundamental change in the way we were designing our buildings. And then from there, it just evolved into, okay, now we have the ICF, we've seen this amount of reduction in energy, where else do we need to attack? And so that really became the mission, is just how do you look at everything and question it, and then add it to the ICF formula.
I was going to ask that question, was it the chicken before the egg, right? Was it the ICF or, zero energy? And it sounds like it was zero energy for most of you, other than Martin, of course. He wanted to do ICF. But ICF is how you were going to be able to get there. And I think I've heard you say getting there with ICF is so much easier than with anything else.
I don't think I can get there without ICF. Not and do it for the same cost as a conventional school.
Right.
Because when I start looking at other building systems, to get that kind of performance, I have to start adding not just insulation, but thermal mass. Thermal mass is a big component.
Right.
And there's just not another system out there that can do it as efficiently. And so that was sort of the very first piece of the puzzle, if you will. And then it became, okay, we know we got to get 75% energy reduction out of what we've been usually designing. ICF gets us, that's a big component. Now we start looking at other things. And when you run out of big ideas, then you look at everything. And so it is a combination, because the lower you go, the harder it gets. Right. It's easy to go from, in Kentucky, for example, we're in climate zone 4, so about 73 EUI is typical for a school. Well, we needed to get down to less than 25. Wow. Now you can do that, and you can make some big decisions, and ICF is one of those big ones. Geothermal that Brian mentioned is another one, and you can start getting down into the 30s. But when you go below that, then you have to look at everything you've done to design a building and question it. And that's how you get down to those numbers. I think it's amazing, we're at 15.5 here at Cumberland Trace.
15.5.
EUI.
And what was typical, 70?
73.
73.
And this is the most energy efficient school operating in Kentucky today.
Wow.
One of the things that I know Mr. Chaffin gets questions from other board members across the state, or probably even across the nation, and I get questions from facility directors and from maintenance directors, is the first thing they want to talk about is net zero or zero energy. And really for us in Warren County, the net zero that's the finish line, that's not the starting point. Warren County has always been very progressive in a lot of different things. Not only were we the first district to have a net zero energy school, the first public school to have an ICF school, we were the first school district in the state of Kentucky to have an energy manager that we brought on board. And so all these things with the energy manager, they help, first of all, make us aware of our energy consumption or energy usage and what techniques that we can do to drive that down. And we also use geothermal heating and cooling. And then you add in ICF, which played a huge role in that. So you add all these pieces together to get you to the net zero energy. It's kind of like all are important dominoes to get you to that finish line of the net zero. And then, as has been said, once you've done it the first time, how can you get even better till you get to the point where we find ourselves here at Cumberland Trace?
Well, that's, I think, an interesting question for you then is how different is it from the first one to today in terms of maybe pushback or community involvement or, all the aspects?
Quite honestly, I don't know that there's a lot of behind-the-scene things that may have changed, but as far as from our community standpoint, they see with Alvaton Elementary being the first school, a safe, energy-efficient school that's nice for their students to go to school in. And then came Richardsville and Bristow and Jody Richards and Jennings Creek and South Warren High and South Warren Middle and soon to be Richpond. And it's the same thing. It's a highly energy-efficient, extremely safe, a nice, very nice school. We don't skimp on anything. We want to have a nice learning experience for our students and work environment for our staff. So from the community's perspective, I think the expectation is these are expectations, and this is how we meet all those goals. But some of these other people behind the scenes can certainly tell you that from Alvaton all the way to today, I'm sure there's been a lot of changes that sometimes board members don't know about.
Exactly. And as far as the community standpoint, most of them are like, well, why do you keep building schools? Well, we are growing at 350 plus kids a year. We are a growth district, and we do have to continually look at expanding and growing our district. So, ultimately, as far as taxpayers, it's like, how are you spending my money, and, are you wasting my money? And that's one thing that as board member, and especially with Mike in the past and the current board, we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, we have been good stewards. We are doing what has to be done. We're building, good buildings that are going to be safe. They're going to be energy efficient. But bottom line is it's where we're putting our kids, our grandkids every day, and that really translate into our community that, that we do have that in the back of our mind when we're looking at a new building. We're just not slapping up new buildings because we got to get something done in a hurry. We want to make sure that it is that safe building. It is that energy efficient building. And if we have the advantage, of being able to make it a zero energy school, then why not do that? The first one we did, we were able to get a grant that really helped us get over that hump and spending the money to go to zero energy because there was a cost to it. And as Kenny said, that cost is coming down. It's getting more reasonable. It's just like anything else in technology. At first it comes out, it's super expensive, and now it's getting better. So, it's there again, it's the, when the taxpayer sees that we're trying to either maintain or limit what we have to do in raising taxes, that's what they're concerned about as far as a community. If we're able to do what we do and do it within reason and still be able to have a great product at the end, that's kind of where I think that goes.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful school. I'm excited to be able to be in it. And to know that you have all these other additional benefits as well.
Well, and just to put it in perspective, what Gary was saying in terms of taxpayer dollars, this is a 750 student school. It's a little bit over 80,000 square feet, right? 83,000 square feet. The annual energy bill here, if we had just designed it normally, would have been about $225,000 annually. By reducing the energy the way we have here, now we've cut that bill from $225,000 to less than $50,000. So a little less than $50,000, and that's what you're zeroing out with the alternative energy. So you can start to see the difference. If you just said we're going to add solar panels and not do anything else, that's really the wrong direction to go. That energy reduction has to come first so that then you're zeroing out a much smaller amount. But just even if you don't put the solar panels on the roof initially, that 75% or greater energy reduction, that's saving, $150,000, $160,000 right there. And then you multiply that by the number of schools you continue to build that way. Now you're looking at millions of dollars of savings.
And then I just wanted to mention, because he hinted at it some, but one of the things the district looks at consistently is the life cycle cost of the building. I mean, it's not just for the building to last just 20 years or 30 years. The expectation is when we go into it that the building's going to be able to last at least 50 years. So we go into it thinking that with the finishes, we think it with the floor finishes, like you saw the terrazzo out in the hallways. That's very specific, not just because it's beautiful, but the fact being that that's a finish that can last at least 50 years and climbing. So we go into the buildings saying, okay, what are good finishes that can withstand students, and the abuse that they give to the spaces? You might have noticed, like, the corridors on this building are block, and then the exterior walls are ICF. So that lended itself not only to constructability of it, but also to the fact of the abuse that the kids can do on the building in general. But for construction standpoint, where Tim was alluding to was the fact of that during construction, you would have your ICF contractor on one wing of the building, for example. They would start the exterior wall envelope, and they would move to the other side of the building, start the exterior envelope of there, which allowed for the block to come in and start being installed and follow right behind it. So then by the time the block was finished on this one corridor, then this corridor was moved to with the block, and the ICF guy went back over there. So it allowed for a multitude of flexibility with the trades so that, you could have your conduits in place and everything following right behind. So it just allowed for a more concise timetable for that construction.
So when we talk about, the energy savings from going from 73 to 15, Chad, does this get you excited as an energy modeler over there?
Yeah, and like Brian said earlier, we're a very data-driven company, and Warren County is really where it all started for our company and net zero design. And you would think that the first net zero school would be in California, but it was right here in Kentucky. So it's very exciting for Warren County and this team that sits here today of what was able to be accomplished. And kind of starting from Allenton, we have the ICF construction, but the technology has improved a lot since then. We had fluorescent lighting back then. We were still able to get really low EWA numbers, but as technology has improved, those numbers have continued to decrease. Which, anybody can build a net zero school if you install enough solar to offset the energy consumption, but doing it economically and low cost, it's better for everyone. And another thing to consider too is kind of the mechanical systems that go into these type of schools, and with the trend going to all electric utility consumption, it just allows us to offset all that energy with solar economically with a utility company, because if you have natural gas boilers or natural gas fossil fuels, that it makes it harder to offset that energy. So it's just it's a really good design, a really good team that we have developed here in Warren County. It's a cost-effective, very efficient net zero school.
Well, and you brought up mechanical systems, so it's something that we always, when we consider, that building envelope, that building enclosure, we focus as an organization on connections and making things airtight, and how are we making that building enclosure as efficient as possible. And our story is because we don't want those HVAC systems and those mechanical systems to constantly be working, and if we're only focusing on the solar panels or the PV, we're going to be wreaking havoc on our mechanical systems.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we study all the buildings here in Warren County that has many different various types of building envelope systems, and Warren County has a very good control system where we can trend the temperatures throughout the day and even at nighttime. And looking at an ICF construction, really when you set the buildings back, we really try to turn off all equipment at nighttime, and the temperatures really don't decrease that much at nighttime. So it's equipment that's not turning on to consume energy. It's less wear and tear on that equipment because it operates less. Having that really good, tight building envelope, that high thermal mass, it just allows these buildings to consume less energy.
And Tim, I know we talked a bit. Jennifer brought it up in terms of coordination, right? Of the trades being able to get working in one area so that we can get some other trades working on interior spaces. Talk to us about that.
I think what it's allowed us to do is really just kind of bring a new trade into the industry to help in the process. Again, with back to Jennifer's example, if you can put an ICF crew on your exterior and your masonry crew on your interior, typically that would be the masonry crew doing both. So now you've kind of divided between two different companies, two different sets of resources, so that you can really expand the amount of people that are working on that, both the exterior envelope as well as your bearing walls inside. So that's really helped us to get enclosed and in the dry. Once your building's in the dry, everything kind of speeds up. So that process of, up out of the ground to covered and in the dry has really picked up a lot. I mean, we've been able to shorten that duration, which in effect shortens the project schedule. And it's really been a big help in the construction process. One other thing I wanted to say about the building envelope is, again, I kind of alluded to, we've kind of experimented with some different products. And when we first started, I think we used treated lumber for like a window opening or a door opening, which traditionally in construction, that's your problem area as far as infiltration and energy loss. We went from, again, treated lumber openings to, there was an era where we were using a manufactured metal frame that was integral to the system and accepted the door, and those got really expensive and put a delay on the front end because it was a long lead item to get, because once you pour your footings, you're building walls, you're ready to go, so you don't have that 4 or 5 weeks or 10 weeks to wait for frames. The Prebuck seems to be the premier system out there now that we're using. And again, all the problem areas that we saw in a building envelope seem to have been perfected or drastically improved, where the Buck system locks into the concrete so you don't have that gap around your windows, and now you can seal those windows and those doors properly. The other one is the transition between the wall and the roof. Some additional spray insulation on that connection has really improved that. So the system is improved, but I think we've also improved a lot of the problem areas that we've had in buildings. And this has aided it, but, with some experimentation on different products, I think we've really got a combination that leads to everything we've said. It's just a much better building envelope, leading to all the other things that we've discussed.
Well, and I think that's part of the lessons learned, right, from school to school, and then also just from that ability to focus on that detailing. I know the pre-engineered wood that you mentioned, I mean, the benefit of having that from a detailing perspective has to lend to ease of installation as well, which I think is important. So
most of that comes to the job site in standard lengths. It's cut, it's manufactured, or basically produced, fabricated right there on a job site. It's not a long lead item. Again, the speed is the availability of materials too. So like I was saying, once you pour your footings, you're coming up because there's no foundation wall or anything like that. You're building walls, so you need openings quickly. Otherwise, you're being held up. So that's really allowed all that to happen. So there's really no delays in waiting on door frames and all the other things that you would in a block wall, because you got to have the door frames to build the exterior walls as well as interior walls. So those things have just kind of worked themselves out.
Well, we always talk about like the devils in the details, right? And I think those are some of those details that we're looking at, as you said, progressing and adding to the value of it. But I think it also brings us back to when we model something or we look at something, what truly is achievable, right? So we might have this vision of where we wanted to go with all of this. How do you guys feel, maybe from the beginning to now, or what were some of those hurdles that you overcame, or some aha moments that you had throughout the process?
There were a few.
There was a few. Okay. Yep.
And since I have current board member and past board member, I'll just go to the very first obvious one. And when we were designing Richardsville, the first net zero school, it was a replacement school, and the original building sat right perpendicular to the road, and it faced the small town that it was built in. And when we showed them the first site plan, we had pushed the new building down the hill and turned it sideways. And so that was a question that you know, and rightfully so. You know, are you sure this is necessary? And I said, well, remember this goal of zero energy. We have to take advantage of our orientation. And so in order to have the building with the natural daylighting we needed and the southern exposure, we literally did have to turn it sideways. But we said once the old building's torn down, I promise you it's going to look good. But you know, it was just that first difference that no one really counted on, you know, being an issue. But you know, it was a pretty big issue. And then, but we all worked together as a team, and so that really helped too, because it wasn't just the architect driving everything or the owner driving everything or the engineer. We all had to come together because it affected everything that we did. And just one other example I'll share with you. Brian had mentioned looking at where energy was going, and the kitchen was one of those. You know, a commercial kitchen in a school this size, we found was using about 22% of the building's energy in a normal school. That's a lot of energy right there concentrated. And so we knew if we were going to get down to the energy savings, we had to really change what was going on in the kitchen. And that meant the way that we were cooking. And so we had to switch from, there's no deep fryers, there's no tilting skillets, it's all done with convection oven and steam. And so getting the kitchen staff on board with that was a really big deal. And we even went to, Duke Energy had a test kitchen in the Carolinas. I don't remember which city it was in, but anyhow, the school district sent them a typical week's menu. And then we went out there and they showed us how you could cook this food differently and more efficiently. And so we got that buy-in from the kitchen manager and the you know, the facility director and everybody that was involved, so that when we opened that school, and you know, everyone understood why these decisions were made. And what came out of that really was really cool, because we were doing it to save energy. Well, from a menu perspective and nutrition perspective, the lunches were getting healthier. And so they implemented that district-wide. And so that was something we hadn't counted on at all. But now they were able to say, not only are we saving all this money and energy, we're feeding the kids healthier. You know, their lunches are now healthier. And that was a benefit that far exceeded the first school.
Wow. So it costs more, it's more energy to have deep fryers and all that other stuff. And
yes, because the typical type 1 hood that you're used to seeing in a commercial kitchen, that's for the grease-laden vapors. And if you can get rid of those, then all you need is the heat steam evacuation, which is a lot more energy efficient.
Wow. So
Brian's the expert on that, but I might just...
No, it's all good. So, you know, so we design it, it gets built, but then it also has to get managed after the fact. And part of the design is actually putting a very elaborate metering system in, especially at Richardsville. It's gotten a little less as the years have gone, because we kind of know where energy is going. But at the time, you know, we were measuring interior lighting, exterior lighting, HVAC, outside air, kitchen. And, you know, we were tracking these things weekly, you know, to make sure, because we had to stay on track for zero energy, because we knew PV production was only going to give us so much, and we had to keep it under that 18 EUI. So part of that, you know, I don't know if it was month 1, month 2, but, you know, we see a little blip on the kitchen, like, uh-oh, something's going on. And, you know, and there were some other things. So what we did, we retro commissioned. So we came back in, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 months later, we're going around, we're like, wait a minute, this ice cream, the ice cream, this freezer wasn't sitting here before. This wasn't on the drawing. So, what we asked them to do is like just unplug it, roll it into the freezer at night. And, that was like some of these little, even though that seems like such a little thing, but for every little thing, you have to add PV. So it's all about getting rid of the little things, especially back then. I mean, PV was 500 or 600% more expensive than it is now. I mean, it was ridiculous if we didn't have some of the grants. Now it's a whole lot more affordable, and if you think, we were able to reduce the EUI, like 3 more EUIs. So that just tells you over 10 years, it's, even back then at 18 UUI, that was a pretty extreme threshold even back then, because we were using fluorescent. And if you think about fluorescent and LED, well, fluorescent, it's about 3 times the energy because they're a lot less inefficient. Not just the lamp itself, but how the light gets out of the fixture. So there's a lot of loss there, where LED's a lot more directional, a lot more efficient. And if we want to get into daylighting, that's another story.
There were a
things
lot
over
of
the
good
years.
stories.
Yeah.
I will say one thing though, since Brian and Chad both said they were data driven, that ice cream freezer, they actually went back and calculated how much energy was being spent just by that piece of equipment that was brought in after the fact. And Brian mentioned solar was more expensive then, but that ice cream freezer, if left in place the way they were using it, was going to use $30,000 worth of solar panels per year.
Oh my goodness.
Just that piece of equipment. And so that really is how detailed we had to get. Now, as far as the natural daylighting, this is one of those things where I mentioned the teamwork is critical, because it wasn't us designing a building that was architecturally attractive and then giving it to our engineers to solve the energy aspect of it. We actually went through, I don't know how many versions of facades with different kinds of window openings, because at that time we were bringing natural daylight in to really take advantage of the sun from 9 to 3 and cut down on our artificial light load. So I think we went through maybe 11, 12 different versions.
Right, and on top of that, even before they even start construction, we actually mocked up a bunch of daylighting strategies at other schools to try to maximize the best, natural daylighting using light shelves and, in different blind systems. So we went through a lot of iterations, I guess.
We did, because it had to be a combination of architect, engineer, and construction manager, because at the same time we were looking at that, we were getting advice from Tim and his company on constructability of these light shelves and how much we were going to span across that.
Yeah.
So we really had to focus on the team together to make it a success.
And we had some pretty wide punched openings in the ICF in the classrooms, to where we did have high daylighting shelves.
If there's someone out there that's hesitant, what would you tell them? Hesitant about going this route. I know you've all been very forthcoming. I've heard through Martin about sharing your experience and sharing with others. I think, Mike, you might have said people have come and or maybe it was Gary that said come to the school on a regular basis to view it and see it as an example. So,
yeah, I would just say that, the fear of the unknown is always there. But, now that we've done this so many times, like you said, you can come and visit one school, or you can visit, I think we've done 24 schools this way now. And so, we can let people know, and we can show the data that you can design a school this way, or any building this way for that matter, and you can do it without adding cost, and you can do it to save a heck of a lot of money. And, to me, it's just a win-win. It's a win for the school system because the money they can put back in the classroom. It's a win for the environment because we're saving energy. We're operating our buildings on much less, and we're doing it in a way that it benefits the students, the community, everyone. And so that's what I would say is that this is the way we should all be designing.
Absolutely, Kenny. I mean, and that's, of course, Mike alluded earlier, of course, our students are in here 8 hours a day, but, our buildings also are part of the community that they reside in. So a lot of these buildings are getting used beyond that 8 hours, for, basketball games, ball games, whatever. But, the thing is that it is, for me, as not only just a board member, but as a resident, a part of Warren County, I definitely can take pride in that building that, we are doing what is best, not only for our community, but for our kids. Because that's ultimately the bottom line is, I talked about earlier, the safety aspect, but the comfort part of it, unfortunately, back in December, we were hit by a tornado. I know some of you may have heard the story, and of course, those that live here, we lived it. And we opened up some of our schools, and Red Cross was there setting up living quarters in our gymnasiums, and they are part of the community when we build them there. I hope to never see another situation, another tornado ever again, because it is very tragic. We had lost several lives in our community, but the fact that we were able to open up our schools to say, hey, here's a place for a warm bed. We set up a kitchen to start feeding people there at Jennings Creek, and that is to me a huge part of it is that it's not just a brick and mortar building. I mean, we're building buildings that will last 50 plus years. We want to have buildings that are pleasing to the eye, but also a comfortable place where the kids can come. I mean, we have a lot of children that their school time is their best, safest time they have. And we want to make sure that is there and that's available for them.
I guess I would say to anyone that's considering ICF construction for their schools, or maybe they're hesitant about it, is don't be. As I mentioned before, Warren County Schools are very progressive or forward-thinking, however you want to call it. But we're not interested in being anyone's guinea pigs either. So we want to do what's best, again, for our students and our staff. And I think that with working with our partners, with Sherman Carter Barnhart and Alliance and Nudura, they got us to where we wanted to be. And it's for us, it's just standard operating procedures. It's the way we do business, the way we build schools. We don't even give it a second thought now. But I understand, because I was that board member that had that hesitancy about, so why can't we go see another ICF school, because there's not one, okay, a public school at that time. But we take that pain away from any school district. Come visit any of our schools. We've been doing it for 15 years now. If it was flash in the pan technology, we would have learned that and steered away from that. But it is effective. It is as advertised, and when you work with good partners like this, you get that outcome that you want for your students, and it's a great environment.
I would say for districts that are just looking at this, this is radical, and how do you do it? For us, this is the norm. It's building a good building, a safe building, and I'm going to say a smart building also, not only because of the technology, but most of the products that we put in are low maintenance, so that's another factor that gets designed into these buildings as far as the floors, the surfaces. That's maintenance is a big part of a project, or the ongoing maintenance of a building is a big part of the cost of a building. So I think we just do smart buildings here, so that we affect not only the utility cost, the maintenance cost, and again, it's a good, solid building.
Just sitting here, And just listening here, I keep thinking back when we first started Alvinton and thinking about ICF. Well, when this first school started, we really didn't even have installers that installed commercially to even build this building. We was just very fortunate that we were able to get concrete contractors to bid the project. Now looking forward to 2022, we have commercial installers all over the country. So now there really shouldn't be a hesitancy for a school district or any type of commercial building by building this way, because we have hundreds of installers literally all over the country. And this really probably, I don't know about doing this, but I just want to thank you all for what you all have done and what it has meant to me just to be a part of this team. So thank you all.
You know, with the cost of energy being so high now, and we know it's going up, and if you can build a building at the same cost as a normal building and have, it doesn't have to be zero energy, but it could be zero energy ready, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer in our opinion, in my opinion, because energy costs are going up. And, you know, with the ICF, it's definitely going to be a more secure building, too. And if you look long-term with operation and maintenance, you know, if we can put less equipment in HVAC, well, that's less to maintain and less to replace. At some point, you're going to have to replace a heat pump unit. And if you've got substantially less units and sizes, well, that's going to be less money later on. So it's just a win-win.
I don't have anything else to add. Everybody has done such a good job. If you don't go for ICF, then sorry, you know.
Well, I want to thank everybody. You know, that I feel the passion from all of you, and the collaboration, I think, was obviously a key part of this, and it feels like a rock solid team. Obviously, you know, 15 years in the making, and I sense you're going to continue to keep building this way. So thank you for your time and attention today. We really appreciate you hosting us here today in this beautiful library that I wish I could go back in time and sit here and read some of these books. You know, so if anyone's looking at wanting more information about building with insulated concrete forms, you can always visit our website at www.nudura.com, and we'll connect you with this wonderful team here today for more information as well.